Okay. And we also have Robert Boyle, who was my teacher at the American Film Institute. We have his family here. Are you guys here? Emily, John, hi. Nick and Jessica, thank you so much. And one more, the great storyboard artist, Mentor Huebner, his daughter is here, Jessica. Hi. Amazing, beautiful artwork.
This is terrific. Oh, is it? Well, I just have to tell you, I mean, I've seen the film before, and I've seen it now 3 times, and I notice new things every time. It just is beautiful and emotional and thought-provoking and so interesting. Yeah, I love it. So.
Thank you.
And I'm thrilled to be able to see it on the big screen. Is this your first time seeing it on the big screen?
Yeah.
For us, it is.
Wow.
It was amazing to hear the audience responding, everyone, the 3 of us, this is our pandemic movie, quite frankly.
We made it over Zoom.
We made it over Zoom. I would screen share Premiere Pro, Adobe, and yeah, absolutely.
Wow, well, it's a special treat. I could ask a million questions tonight, but I'll keep it short because I know we don't want to sleep here. First, can you talk about how you came to Fiddler and what was your interest in making this documentary? What was the genesis of it, and what drew you to the particular story of Fiddler on the Roof?
When I was 13, I saw the film for the first time. I hadn't seen the play, I hadn't heard the music. I saw it at my grandparents' home, and it was quite powerful and touching to see it with them. They had the double VHS tape and square TV, but to the left of the television set, hanging on the wall, was a portrait of my great-grandparents who died in the Holocaust. And I'm just trying to wrap my head around Jewish history, where my great-grandparents came from, my grandparents. And then I was sucked in by the music and the beautiful story. And years later, when I went to the American Film Institute and met the production designer, he was my professor, Robert Boyle, I started to document the making of Fiddler on the Roof through interviewing Bob Boyle and Norman Jewison for a doc I made in 2000 called The Man on Lincoln's Nose. And that was that archival. And finally, in 2009, when this thing really kicked into gear, I saw Topol perform at his farewell tour at the Pantages, and I was struck by how the audience standing around me singing, and the songs, in full vocal, were mostly from different ethnic backgrounds. And that was like amazing to me, that this movie could reach so many people from different backgrounds. And that year I interviewed Topol in 2009, and that was the starting point.
So you started this back in 2009.
Yeah, 13 years in the making.
Wow, that's amazing. What connected the 3 of you to work together on this? And if you can talk about your expertise and what each one of you brought to the production.
Mike, you want to start when you got a call from me or something I mentioned? I don't know.
Well, Dan and I have worked together on a couple of films. One short film, which I highly recommend you see. It's only 9 minutes long. It's a lot of fun. It's called Marvel Mon Amour. It's about the little-known friendship between Stan Lee and Alain Resnais. We got along on that.
Criterion Collection.
It's on the Criterion channel, and it's probably on YouTube now. And then Dan and I had collaborated on a movie I was so proud to be a part of, Image Makers, The Adventures of America's Pioneer Cinematographers, and that played on TCM. And right after it was finished, Dan started talking about having all this footage of, over the years, of Topol and Norman Jewison and Robert Boyle, and things you don't even see on the screen, like an interview with Israeli critic Dan Marone. And we took a look at it, and I was very taken with the idea of kind of making a movie about the movie Fiddler, not the whole Fiddler phenomenon particularly, but the movie version, which is so different from the play, and which has actually become the benchmark version for generations of people who see Fiddler. And I think has artistic qualities, all its own, apart from the play, both in its look and its tone and the interpretation of the characters. So that's how I got together with Dan on that, and soon we were joined.
That's right. Well, Dan and I worked together in, was it 2016?
17.
Dan made a wonderful documentary called Harold and Lillian, A Hollywood Love Story. I showed that. And I was the publicist for that film, and that's how we met. And we stayed in touch. We would see each other from time to time, and then Dan called me about 2.5 years now, and he said, I have this footage, and I'm looking for a producer, and I said, I would like to produce a documentary, and that's how it happened.
And you told me that your grandmother, could you talk about that?
Well, I have a very personal connection to Fiddler on the Roof, just because, I am from Ukraine, from Kiev, and my grandmother grew up in a shtetl exactly like Anatevka. She was born in 1902, and she lived through pogroms, she lived through everything that you see in the movie is really, in a way, her life. She had 3 sisters. My great-grandmother was killed in one of the pogroms. So it felt, and I grew up listening to these stories, and I actually really connected to those stories. So it did feel very personal, and I wanted to kind of bring this story out, because the film was made 50 years ago. A lot of people of even our generation haven't seen the film, so hopefully this will encourage people to go back and see Fiddler on the Roof.
It's interesting, so you grew up in Ukraine. When did you see this film?
Oh, I saw it here, of course. I saw it in this country. Yeah, I don't remember exactly when, but of course I rewatched it as an adult. But I don't think I've seen it as a child, no.
Interesting.
And of Ukraine, of course, we should make it explicit for those who don't. These stories were set in Ukraine. Shlomo Aleichem lived in Kiev. He grew up in a small village outside of Kiev. So this is really when Kenny Turan came up with that great insight at the end about shooting in Yugoslavia, which was so powerful and just such a gift to us as filmmakers. But now when I watch it, I just can't get Ukraine out of my head. And I think that's actually one of the great qualities of the film, is how daringly it goes in that direction to deal with the grief and the loss. Norman devotes 20 minutes to the exodus out of the village. And those shots to me are as great as anything in Griffith or Ford or anybody. I think it's amazing. So, it was just a treat to get the invitation to work on a film that was about a great film that can inspire you, to do something transcendent like that.
100%.
I was just going to mention something else. When I was growing up, my family had complete works of Sholem Aleichem, which was translated into Russian, and we still have them. My parents, we brought them with us. So my mother in Boston has complete works of Sholem Aleichem in Russian.
It's just a beautiful, beautiful documentary. Thank you. It's truly very moving.
Thank you for being a part of it. You're the key part.
Well, the joy of seeing a performance like yours is Hodel. Really. And seeing you react to Dan in your interview with such authenticity and directness. You move me every time I watch it, whether you're playing Hodel or you're remembering playing Hodel. And I think that's one of the things Dan gets at in the film is, Roger Ebert used to talk about movies as machines for empathy. Machines that make empathy. And of course, the great part of a great film is that you forget it's a machine, because there's such a synthesis of the spirit of the people making it and what their goal is. And that's, you achieve that in your
Well, I
performance.
still get moved. It's just, all these years later, it's still fresh. Wound, no.
So
Just emotional.
how did you come to get Michele to be in the
Well,
film?
Sasha, didn't
How did you connect?
I emailed you. I emailed Michele, and
So she lives in Idlewild, and we arrive, park out right in front of your house, and we're coming through the garage with our gear, with our equipment. There's this little box, as there is always. It said Fiddler on the, like shoe box, no, it was box. It said Fiddler on the roof, handwritten, right?
Right. Well, it was an evacuation box because we have chance of fires.
An evacuation box,
Yeah.
the most important box.
Yes,
right?
the most important, and it had all my still photographs from Fiddler.
Yeah. It's a documentary filmmaker's dream to have an evacuation box as you're coming in. It says Fiddler on the roof on it. This movie wouldn't be the same movie thanks to your box.
I have a lot of pictures.
Treasure
yeah,
trove.
yeah.
I've never before seen you took many of these pictures, some of these.
I took a lot of them, but there was a still photographer too, yeah, that took shots.
Such great personal photographs of you and Neva and Roz and the letter. So I want to just thank you so much for sharing, opening your evacuation box, sharing your inner world with us. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I also want to say something about Dan, because, this was a very low budget production. I mean, basically, the three of us worked on this film for a while, but if it wasn't for Dan's skill as an editor, of course as a director, but also as an editor, we wouldn't be here, because he did really everything. So,
Thank you, Sasha. I appreciate it. Thank you. Appreciate it. It was a collaboration, a beautiful collaboration. I want to also, Jeff Goldblum didn't just read words. He read Michael Sragow's beautiful narration. Thank you, Michael. And countless days and hours, just kind of, I like to work with transcripts and paper edits, and that's a lot of the work we did, and the three of us too, and gosh, I don't know. I think that one of the things that, you can shoot these interviews with the evacuation box, but it's not until you get into the edit and you see collectively how I've been asked often, like, what did you learn, or what surprised you the most making this? And it's really in the edit discovering you and Neva and Roz as a collective voice of three beautiful souls, and what you brought to Fiddler on the Roof, and how you made it such a timeless, what you contributed to making it such a timeless masterpiece, in my opinion. Yeah, and what resonates, so thank you.
Thank you.
Michele, you, okay, so for many people, I know for myself as a child, I had seen the film, or maybe I was too young to see the film at that point, but my parents had the album, so I knew every word to every song. So you have probably been in the households of many of the people here. This is now, you're a real person that they get to see, not just this character in the movie. But, and it's such an honor to be sitting next to you right now. And you're the only one here who can actually speak about the actual experience of working on the film. So can you talk a little bit about what it was like personally to work with Jewison, and some of the, how did you connect with your character? Some details about your
Well,
experience.
I kind of learned about myself through the character. I mean, like I said, I was not feeling very secure, and especially not being Jewish. I just thought that Norman was going to change his mind, So I did a lot of studying about the Jewish faith and Jewish mysticism, and the shtetls, and I did a lot of studying, and so she grew on me as I grew up. And Norman was just a gentle soul. I mean, it was very encouraging. It was a very supportive, atmosphere. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. very
How long was the shoot?
Well, it was almost over a year's time. Yeah. am I not talking, okay. We had, because like you pointed out, that we had, what do they call it, an Indian summer in Yugoslavia, and so we weren't getting the cold, we weren't getting the snow, and that's, oh, and the other thing that happened was they had built in Yugoslavia this tent where we were going to do all the interiors, you know, but it was like this dome that when it wasn't being used, they would blow, you know, to keep it up, and then they'd have to turn it off when we started shooting. But what they discovered was, and all the interiors were going to be shot there, and what they discovered was that you could be talking at this end of the tent, whispering, and it carried all the way to the other side, and it was like useless. So that's one of the reasons we went back to London to shoot all the interiors, because, you know, and because it was this summertime, you know, in December, we waited, you know, until February to go back with a skeleton crew to do the On the Tempe, Leaving, and Far From the Home I Love. Yeah.
What other challenges did you face? What challenges did you personally face during the shoot?
During the shoot?
Yeah, are there any personal challenges for you?
Well, recording the songs, I think it was in a little higher key originally for me, and afterwards I heard that Norman was a little concerned that my voice was too breathy in singing, and in the post-production they brought in some Broadway singers, Broadway stars to sing, but I guess what they discovered was that the voices were too big for the screen. So they transposed the song Far From the Home I Love a little bit lower for me. I re-recorded it, and they used my voice. Yeah, but that was
Beautiful voice.
I was going to say, you have a beautiful voice.
But that was very emotional for me, you know, thinking that they were going to dub me. Or am I not talking?
Well, that's a terrifying feeling. You
It
put
is.
so much into Hodel.
Yeah, it was, yeah.
I like when you talk about in the film that the last scene for you was the last scene, and that's
Yes.
also very emotional.
Very much so. Very much so, yeah.
Yeah, there's so many wonderful things that you bring to light in this film that nobody could possibly know. You talk about putting it all together in the edit. How much footage did you have?
I would say that with Norman Jewison, the key interview was in 2016. It was, gosh, a 90-minute interview. And I said, we have to squeeze the life out of this interview because that's what I have and that's what we're going to get. And fortunately, we got it when we got it. And Mike, also in addition to co-writing, did incredible research work. And can you speak to that, Mike?
Well, yeah, I mean, we were partly because we were putting this together during the pandemic, and we didn't have all the resources we'd want or the ability to go out and find things. I was really at the computer a long time, trying to find things that could flesh out some of these bits, because we knew Dan had this amazing stuff, and you know, we knew Norman had written his autobiography, the biography of Madden Knapp. But you know, we needed bits and pieces to really fill it out. So we found the DGA interview, which gave us Norman actually talking about Bobby Kennedy, talking about taking that bus ride to New Orleans, talking about meeting Ben Gurion, and you know, if I had just seen the DGA interview, I wouldn't have said, "Oh, we can do a portrait of Norman," but because Dan had this incredible bass, and we were able to stitch it in, and occasionally, as you know, a guy who's mostly a film critic. Or has been all most of my life, I would find these things that just made it all worthwhile. Like I found the Tonight with Belafonte special, and it was so great I mean, it just completely uplifted. I mean, I thought, well, you know, we can't use that much of it, but if we use anything in it and someone is moved to like get the whole thing and restore it and put it out, that would be a great thing. So we were doing all sorts of things like that. But, you know, without Dan's interviews with Jewish, and I gotta say, Robert Boyle to me is one of the most moving figures in the movie. I mean, when he talks about his wife and her love of Yiddish theater and her experience in the Yiddish theater, and when he makes it understandable, what a production designer does, that it's about making the people understandable. This is why it's a great humanist movie, and I find him so moving, and we're so lucky that Dan studied with him and had this footage with him and of course that's one of the themes we all had fun with, which was that none of the production heads in Fiddler on the Roof were actually Jewish.
Yeah.
I mean, the only guy, and I only knew this when he died last year and read the obituaries, Lynn Stallmaster, the casting director, he was actually Jewish, but he was the only one.
Well, the footage that we have, we're going to have an amazing Blu-ray and amazing DVD down the line because we have all this extra stuff that will be included. But of course, the film is opening theatrically in New York this Friday. Dan is going.
Right on.
And,
All your friends, Diva.
yeah.
Small. Please.
No, I was just going to say the other two sisters will be in New York, Neva Small and Rosalind Harris. So Dan will be doing Q&As with them. So if you have, obviously everyone has friends in New York, please tell them. The film is opening at Angelica. And then next Friday at the Royal. And
The May 6th at
May
the
6th,
Royal.
yeah.
And yeah.
And we're
sadly-
doing another sneak preview on May 5th.
that's right, May 5th.
Yeah.
And sadly, Michelle, you're traveling, so I'm so glad it worked out. You're
Michelle, make
leaving-
a stop in New York and you can have the three of you reunited.
There you go.
Stop by in New York, but.
Stop by in New York.
But I also want to speak to your question about the edit. In 2019, a beautiful documentary came out called Fiddler, Miracle of Miracles. And I imagine all Fiddler fans have seen that. In a way, it was quite liberating that it was made. When I finished my interview with Sheldon Harnick in 2017, he said, "You better hurry up. Somebody else just interviewed me last week." But I made another movie, Harold and Lillian, and I'm so glad to do that.
Yeah.
And so I'm so glad because this, Fiddler, Miracle, Miracles is an investigation of the origins of the Broadway production and all its incarnations in high schools and all over the world. Beautifully made, but it freed us to zero in. And at the end of my interview with Norman in 2016, he says, "I found myself making Fiddler on the Roof." And I said, "Sasha, Mike, let's make a movie about that. What does that mean? And how can we like dramatize that? How can we create, what is that narrative? What is the inner journey?" Fortunately, he wrote a beautiful autobiography, which I read twice before interviewing him, and I was so taken by the impact of Bobby Kennedy's assassination on him. He was already on his way to London to shoot, right, Fiddler on the Roof, but still, the way that he said, he questioned whether or not he could find joy in the art and craft of directing. And Fiddler did revive his soul, ultimately. I think that there's so much to it. This is not the definitive documentary about the making of Fiddler on the Roof. There's so much more to say.
Yeah, I was going to ask you. Well, first of all, you said something very interesting about the loss of Bobby Kennedy. He's a very spiritual person. At least he's portrayed. You've gotten the best of him in this. And I think this is a spiritual journey. And the fact that he didn't know where he belonged. He always felt like he wanted to be Jewish. And then he has a Jewish wedding. So I'm always fascinated by a Jewish soul and somebody who's not Jewish, and he is one. So this film, what you showed was that he was so deeply connected to it. You don't, what did he say? Ben Gurion said, if you want to be a Jew, you're a Jew.
I've considered myself an honorary Jew. I am married to a Jewish man.
Oh, boy.
So it makes me an honorary Jew, doesn't it?
Well, you're very Jewish because you played Hodel, an Orthodox
Oh,
Jew,
okay.
so.
But a lot of the movie is about identity in a bigger sense. I mean, because when you say he's an honorary Jew, what does being a Jew mean to Norman? I mean, he responds to something that's personal, that's sort of combative in a way also, and that's resilient. And the resilience of the material is what ultimately is so moving, the resilience of Tevye. And I love Kenny Durant in this movie. We were so lucky to have him. And he articulates something that was often said against the movie, actually, which is that he thought that Zoroaster was more of an Eastern European. But I really disagree with that. I mean, we have John Williams saying the counterpoint and Norman, but, you know, the stories are written, the Tevye stories are written as if Tevye is talking to Sholem Aleichem. So there's very little physical description of Tevye. But in an early draft, Aleichem actually said Tevye had thick hair, he was broad-shouldered, he looked like he lived to be 90, and he has none of the minor afflictions that afflict the rest of us Jews, he said. So in fact, he was just as big and tough and strong a guy. We're just so influenced by all the illustrators we see and by other interpretations of Tevye. I think Topol's Tevye is not just an Israeli Tevye, but he is an Aleichem Tevye, to the bone.
Yeah. You interviewed Topol once or twice?
Just once, yeah. It was amazing to hear him speak to hearing stories of Shalom Aleichem by his father, who didn't have to even read the book, the words. You know, he remembered them, and that's the thing also about Norman and Bob Boyle and Topol spoke to me about reading Shalom Aleichem and being inspired by the core story. And Shalom Aleichem's daughter wrote about meeting a real-life milkman named Tevye, who brought milk to their door in Kiev. And I so wanted to somehow investigate and explore more about Shalom Aleichem. And then there's a beautiful film that was made in 2011 called Shalom Aleichem Dancing in the Dark. And I adore that film. And so I think that and also interesting to hear, I don't remember, I think it was someone in this film right now said that it was Shalom Aleichem original writing that made it universal. Like he found the universality in the character Tevye and his issue, you know, his relationship with God and with his family.
Absolutely. I want to switch for a minute and talk about the music, because it's a whole other character in the production in the movie and also the music in your film. But can you talk more about Sheldon and interview with him, and does that seem like another pretty special?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I was so curious to really sit and talk with Sheldon about his craft. And I'm really grateful I have like this 2-hour in-depth career-spanning interview with Sheldon. And he really goes deep into, he's like, when I write lyrics, I'm a dramatist. I'm thinking like a dramatist, like a screenwriter. And he takes long walks. I mean, there's so much to say about his craft. And it's also connected to his own personal stories and his marriages and of different faith, you know, Jewish, non-Jewish, and his father and the tensions in his own family. But yeah, I mean, meeting Sheldon was amazing. And then we have you know, again, he didn't have the what's it called, the evacuation box. And Sheldon had his own evacuation box. And in that, he had the original book, you know, with all the lyrics of songs that didn't make it. He sang so many different
That was
numbers.
amazing to actually, I mean, you really shared such a gem by showing your audience the original songbook.
Yeah,
Now, when we did that Q&A in 2020, you showed a clip,
I did.
which is not in here, of him
Yeah.
singing an original song.
That's right.
Can you share that?
I don't remember the name of the song. Do you recall?
What, the new song he wrote for Fiddler? Is that
A
what?
song that didn't
The song that didn't make it
Into the movie, he wrote a song called Any Day Now, which was supposed to be Perchik's Big
Perchik's,
Number, yeah, where he talks about waving the red flag. I think those lyrics are actually in the song, but he recorded it. You can hear it on the soundtracks. There's a difference of opinion on whether he actually filmed it. Sheldon actually told Dan that Norman filmed it, and cut it out after a preview when the film was too long. But most people think it was just recorded and never filmed. So.
And Sheldon is turning 98 years old next week.
98,
Wow.
yeah.
98.
Can I praise Dan for one thing that just kills me every time? You talk about the editing. I think the editing of the number, Do You Love Me, when Topol is talking about bringing his performance down, that Jewison had him do that. I think the interplay of Topol's describing that, his saying that, we hear him sing it in this very low-key way, and the performances of him and Norma Crane are so heartbreaking. And it's just great, and it also shows what you said about Harnick. That actually is a number that's a scene. That's the scene, is that song. And that's how Harnick works, and I think he's at his just best when he's telling the story that way. And if you want to see how really, I mean, one of the fun parts of this for me was reading a lot of Sholem Aleichem, and you see Aleichem's words in Harnick's lyrics, actually, even more than you do in Stein's play, although Stein did a genius job of threading those stories together.
That's really amazing. What were the challenges for each one of you on the making of this film, and how did COVID impact this?
Well, I mean, we made this film in COVID, so that was kind of a given. We couldn't travel to New York to do the interviews with the other two sisters, so Dan came up with a brilliant idea of doing those interviews over Zoom. We found a cinematographer, and we found a place where they could go, that beautiful apartment, and we, the three of us, watched the interviews over Zoom as the interviews were being done in New York, and it looked seamless. You would never tell that none of us were there. So,
That's really interesting.
Oh gosh, well, you know, I like to learn as much as I possibly can, so being not able to go out and you know, go through archives and find people who, you know, might talk, who might not be on camera but might give us something. I mean, that's built in, but
You wanted to go to the Jewison archive.
at McGill, I think it is,
Yeah.
yeah. But you know, the thing that there's an adrenaline rush to that too. You deal with, you know, the materials you can work with, and it was kind of exciting when COVID lifted, briefly anyway, and we, you know, put together these interviews. Thanks, Sasha, with the daughters. Michele, you were the second, actually. I think Kenny Duran was the first, and then we did the daughters, and then we got. It was great to get John Williams, who really just wanted to sit down and talk about Norman Jewison and making this movie, and he really hadn't talked that much at length. I think it's a really precious interview that Dan did there, and we were just so lucky. He came in and he talked, and he was enthusiastic, and it was really like getting artistic blessing. It was getting his cooperation with that. So there was an adrenaline thing about getting these people finally, and then starting to put the whole thing together that stands, you know,